A show like none we'd ever seen before toured Australia's racetracks in the late 1980s and early 90s. The main attraction was a horse that went faster for longer than anything the turf had seen for years, perhaps ever. And the ringmaster was a wizard at dragging the punters through the gates. For 4 years, the Vic and Vo show captivated racegoers around the country with their deeds in 4 states. But it was more than just a show. For all the hype, Vic Rail and Vo Rogue were the real thing. They would have become 2 of the great heroes of the Australian turf, and together they would be remembered as one of its great legends. When they weren't being feted as the greatest show on turf, it was obvious Vic Rail was a remarkable and unique trainer of thoroughbreds, and Vo Rogue, simply one of Australia's greatest ever racehorses. But it didn't start out that way.
I think it was Saturday night that he arrived, and then on the Sunday morning I went around there and I said, "What's that thing in the sand roll there, Victor?" And Vic said, "That's got to be your horse," he said, "because that's the only one that's coming up that I know of." And I looked at this thing and it looked like a big Great Dane, and these 2 big eyes just looked up at me and said, "What are you going to do with me?" We were going to put him through the Magic Millions sales, or we thought we were, until we saw him in the sand roll. And I said to Vic, gee, we should send this horse back to its owner. He said, "Well, if we send him back to the owner," he said, "he'll die on the float trip back." He said, "We'll have to feed him for a while." So we fed him for 6 weeks before he could worm him. And one day I was taking him out of his stall. He was unbroken and that, and he sort of walked out to the sand roll. He knew he'd just run away on me, and I grabbed him by the tail. And he just sort of pulled me straight out of the sand roll, and I said, "Gee, this horse has got a few brains." And I think I just fell in love with him from there.
Vo Rogue may not have looked a world beater in that Southport win of January '87, but by the time he won at Doomben 2 starts later, a quality 3-year-old was emerging. The win was enough to convince Vic to take on the big time in Melbourne and team up again with Cyril Small.
I did a 3-month suspension and got married at the same time, so I was away on honeymoon. The week later, after the honeymoon, I went to Melbourne. I had to waste fairly hard to ride him, but he won by 8 lengths on Australia Cup Day.
They balance for the run home. Vo Rogue with a big lead. He's more than 4 lengths in front over War Correspondent under the whip. A good gap to Mr. Impertinent, Chrysidium and Sly Habit out wider. Vo Rogue has still got 5 lengths on the opposition as they race down to the 100. He's been in front from the very jump, and the Queenslanders run them ragged. It's Vo Rogue from War Correspondent, Sly Habit and Chrysidium, and Vo Rogue reached the judge by about 8 lengths. Go for Sly Habit.
It was his effort in the Creswick Stakes that pointed to the horse's real potential. His 8th start in 9 weeks produced one of the wins of the Melbourne Autumn Carnival of 1987. He defied all challenges up the Flemington Straight, and when they checked the time, found he'd run the 2,000 metres in a blistering 2 minutes and 7/10 of a second. Then came this.
Vo Rogue turns around the bend 2 lengths in front over Ravenel and Cossack Warrior the outside. El Vaquero trying to get up on the fence from Myocard. Vo Rogue has been in front from the start. Hard Ridden is holding Cossack Warrior, Ravenel at bay, and Vo Rogue from barrier to box. Vo Rogue first, second Cossack Warrior, either
and
Ravenel
a star was born. The freewheeling Queenslander ran the 2,040 metres in race record time. Vo Rogue failed dismally in 2 subsequent Sydney starts, but he was at the end of a strenuous second preparation. After 11 starts in 3 months in 3 states, the young star was looking for a rest. He came back a better, stronger galloper in the spring, after wins at Doomben and Ipswich and placings in the Fian Stakes and the Royal Show Handicap. The 4-year-old was back at Flemington. The result? He carved out the 2,000 metres of the Turnbull Stakes in a brilliant 2 minutes, 1.3 seconds. But it wasn't until his next campaign, the autumn of 1988, that the champion arrived.
Vo Rogue trying to steal the Noritake. William Reid Stakes 3 lengths in front of Groucho near the turn. Clark calling on Military Plume for his run. A half length away then Northern Copy. Campaign King going up on the fence. King Phoenix the outside and Ravineau. Vo Rogue a length and a quarter in front. Groucho called for his effort in second placing. Then Military Plume 2 lengths. Campaign King, King Phoenix. They're into the straight and Vo Rogue challenged by Military Plume from Groucho and then Campaign King. It's Vo Rogue in front. He's fighting on too well. Vo Rogue all the way. The Queensland champion. Vo Rogue won from Military.
That was the start of something special.
He's gone for the whip on Vo Rogue, but they're not making any ground on him. 200 to go. Vo Rogue's got it. One, he's walked in. Vic Rail's got this horse fit. Vo Rogue's now 6 in front of King Phoenix, running up the second with Groucho and then Military Plume. Vo Rogue's won by 5 lengths to King Phoenix. Still 6 in front. He rides him along now. He's got it 1. What an exciting horse this is. Vo Rogue's 6 lengths in front of Bonhomie, King Phoenix and Cossack Warrior. Vo Rogue has won by 7 lengths. Bonhomie second.
5-1 on in the St George Stakes. And Vo Rogue didn't give the punters who took the prohibitive odds a moment's worry. He had trained on perfectly from the Blamey Stakes, where he ran the mile in a sizzling 1 minute 34 flat to post another record.
You can't beat him no matter what you do. Vo Rogue comes away, wins by 2.5 lengths. Cossack Warrior 3 lengths on the line.
He had to work harder to dispatch Campaign King in the Futurity. But he was stepping back to 1,400 metres. And after all, it was Campaign King.
He's gone for the whip on Vo Rogue. Campaign King's got to his girth. Vo Rogue jumped in front. Campaign King trying. The Vo in front. He's done it again.
The win set up the match race of the century as they built it. Vo Rogue versus the Great Bone Crusher, with Vo starting even money to take the prize. He won the match, but not the race. Dandy Andy, a bolter, arrived late to spoil the punter's day.
Vo Rogue stopping, and Dandy Andy's coming hard. Thompson, this is going to be a boil over. Dandy Andy's going to beat Vo Rogue. Dandy Andy, Brent Thompson beat Vo Rogue. Bone Crushers run third.
Well, that was, on his part, I think one of his very courageous races to run second in that race. He'd raced the week before in a 7 furlong race and beat Campaign King, and he came out on a slightly rain-affected track, which he despised a lot, and he wasn't quite the same horse on that day, and he still ran a very gallant second. He crushed Bone Crusher, but Dandy Andy happened to be along there on the day, and he put in one of his best runs ever, Dandy Andy. I think prior to that, the closest he ever got behind us was 10 lengths.
That started a run of 6 outs for the champion, and he had to return to Flemington to break the drought.
Vo Rogue nicely in front at the 200. Small is going for dear life on him. He leads by 2.5 lengths over Eberly Show. Apollo Run finishing well from Kenzai. Vo Rogue in front. He's hanging on. He's going to win his second successive Turnbull. Vo Rogue greets the judge. Vo Rogue by...
He followed this with one of his greatest victories. Lumping 61 kilos after being switched back in distance 600 metres, the champ was forced to come from behind in a field of 16 at Caulfield to collect the prize. That race should have made him a short-priced favourite for the 88 Cox Plate. But controversy would deny the mighty galloper his best chance of winning Australia's best race. Arguments erupted over the champ's absence, but the one fact remains that our poetic prince won the Weight for Age Championship on a track rated good, while Vo Rogue was back in his stall. Wins at Eagle Farm and in the Winfield Classic at Ascot in Perth confirmed the Iron Horse's constitution before another Melbourne Autumn campaign. If he was already a champion, then the autumn of '89 proved Vo Rogue a super horse. And super is the operative word.
In front here, Superimpose finishing well. Vo Rogue still nicely clear from Superimpose, taking a little bit of ground off him. But hands and heels, the Queensland champ, too good. Vo Rogue wins at a length and a quarter.
Consider this. Superimpose went on to become one of the great horses in Australian racing history. yet he couldn't get near Vo Rogue.
300. Small sitting quietly on him. He leads about 5 lengths to Superimpose. In third placing, Ideal Sediment, followed by Dandy Andy. Shakes up Vo Rogue with 100 metres to go. It's a walk, trot and canter for Vo Rogue. Here's win number 21. The Vo Rogue show keeps rolling along. Vo scores easily from Superimpose.
And it's Small waving the whip at Vo Rogue. He leads by about 3 lengths here. Our Poetic Prince going up on the outside of Dandy Andy and Superimpose well clear of the rest. 200 metres from home and Vo Rogue is going great guns. He's more than 2.5 lengths in front over Superimpose and then Our Poetic Prince, and Vo Rogue is going to lead all the way again. A great performance in the Australian Cup.
In fact, Superimpose only came into his own after Vo Rogue's career was on the decline, and trainer Lee Friedman admitted to eventually working his horse's program around avoiding the mighty Queenslander. For Vic Rail, owners Jeff Perry and Gary Roberts, who had acquired a 5th share in the champion, and jockey Cyril Small, it was the high point in one of racing's greatest fairy tales.
He helped me along the way, like helped us build a nice home, and I suppose made my name well known throughout the racing industry. Whenever anyone mentions Vo Rogue, they sort of remember who rode him, more so than a lot of other horses, which have a lot of different riders on. But I was very fortunate to have exceptionally good owner that stuck by me through thick and thin.
He made me a millionaire, yes. Like any other way, it's hard to say. But he made me a millionaire.
While Vo Rogue probably never reached those heights again, the great galloper had a couple of historic wins left in him. He would win his one and only Sydney race at his next campaign. And what a race to win.
Vo Rogue is the leader. Vo Rogue by a length on Marimbula Bay, the first to go after him. Here comes Groucho. Stylish Century is still there. Don't Play, not getting much room. And From the Planet down the extreme outside, but Vo Rogue won't give up. He's still in front. Groucho's grabbing him now. Groucho coming at Vo Rogue. Don't Play, getting a rails run. Vo Rogue in front. He's got a heart as big as himself. He'll win. Vo Rogue. Vo Rogue has cracked it at last in Sydney.
Look at that. The Rogue wasn't able to set up a break over the Randwick Mile and looked beaten several times up the straight, but he just kept giving. He refused to be beaten. The wins were running out for Vo Rogue against a new brigade of top horses, and his 6-year-old legs weren't carrying him as fast as they used to after more than 50 race starts. Or were they?
Rogue with a big lead inside the 400. He's 4 lengths in front of Stylish Century, who can't peg back the leader. Better Loosen Up is starting to finish quickly on the outside. Vo Rogue in front by 3 at the 200. Better Loosen Up the danger. Superimpose coming quickly. Vo Rogue about 2 lengths in front of Better Loosen Up. Superimpose. Vo Rogue with 100 to go by a length. He's holding them at bay. The Rogue will win his second in a row. Vo Rogue wins at a length. Better Loosen Up. Superimpose is third, 3/4 of a length away. Then
it would be Vo Rogue's last win. He would have another 16 starts, but despite a courageous second to Better Loosen Up in the 1991 Australian Cup, the 7-year-old was clearly past his best. He retired the winner of 26 races and over $3 million in stake money. Tragically, Vic Rail died just over 3 years later, an unlikely victim of the equine morbillivirus that brought Brisbane racing to a standstill in 1994. Vo Rogue is often overlooked in discussions about the greats of the turf, with many considering the horse and trainer a lovable team rather than credit the horse as a true champion. The fact remains that Superimpose was a champion, Better Loosen Up beat the best in the world, and Campaign King was a sensational sprinter. But when Vo Rogue was at his peak, they could only chase him.
But that's how he used to win his races. He'd run them off their legs, and by the time he got to the furlong, the clock tower, they were tired chasing him. They used to make a run at him about the clock tower, but by the time they got past that, they were come to the end of their runs, and he was still going as good as ever, and he 9 times out of 10 held them off.